Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got the whole crew with us, Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, on this Tuesday afternoon. Getting ready for a very fun edition of the Junkyard Dawgcast. We did this back in the spring. This will be our fall camp breakouts draft, which we will get into a little later on this episode. We're going to draft teams of 7 players, giving who we think will make a lot of noise for Georgia. Not necessarily starters, but guys that we think can really make some noise. And I would tell everyone who is watching this, if there's someone you like as a breakout candidate, throw it in the comments. One, might help us as we get ready to draft these teams. But 2, be fun to point them out and then revisit those picks by the time fall camp is in the books. I wanted to make sure before we jumped into this episode to mention what had happened on Friday. RaRa Thomas being arrested on a felony charge of cruelty to children, a couple of battery charges. As of Tuesday, right around noon, he was released on bonds totaling $3,500. I would encourage everyone to go to Dogs 24/7. We've had stories and updates on the RaRa Thomas situation there. He has been indefinitely suspended by Georgia, and I expect on Thursday when fall camp opens that Kirby Smart will either comment on the RaRa Thomas situation or he will surely be asked about it. So I want to make sure everyone who is listening and watching was up to speed on the latest on that situation. Well, guys, there was a lot of recruiting news over the last few days. Ben has been staying busy with everything that Georgia has been able to do, everything Georgia has been able to add. And it started on Saturday with 2026 3-star cornerback John Tavius Wyman committing to Georgia. And then a big Monday with 3-star defensive lineman J.J. Hannay committing to the Bulldogs. He is in this upcoming class. And then 2026 4-star cornerback Dominic Kelly flipping his commitment from USC to Georgia. And there's obviously a lot of interest about all 3 of these guys. But, Ben, tell me about J.J. Hannay, just what he is. You know, he's got a very interesting story, how he has gotten to this point in his career and what the Bulldogs are getting in this young defensive lineman.
Yeah, I mean, so JJ is one of the more fascinating prospects in this entire class, in my opinion. And I think the reason for that is because he's so new to football. And for those that aren't familiar with his story, this is a guy who was born in Berlin, Germany, lived in Berlin, Germany until 2022, when part of an international football placement program, he was placed with the high school in California that he plays at now. So he's really new to playing football in the States. He's relatively new to playing football just in general, but he's someone that, like, if you go look at his junior year tape, it's very raw. I don't think that anybody's going to look at his junior year tape and it flash out to you and say, this screams UGA defensive end. But I think that what's happened with him, because he's so new to the game, his year-by-year development has been really impressive. And it sounds like, in talking to folks that have watched this one closely since December all the way to now, he's made unbelievable strides just in, the 6-7 months since his junior season ended. This is somebody that camped with Georgia in May, or at the very end of May. And that first big camp was really important because Georgia wanted to get as many of its top targets on campus for that weekend as possible. And he's someone that showed up. He's 6'5", 280 pounds, someone that the way that he moves, I think Georgia thinks could play anywhere from the 3 all the way out to a crash 9. I mean, I think that his versatility is the reason why he appeals so much to Georgia. So after that camp that he took in May, it looked like he was going to take an official visit at the end of June. He didn't end up taking that just because of some passport issues on the family side. Trey Scott, it was really important to him that he brought in JJ and his entire family for the official visit. And so they're planning to still reschedule something for the fall. They're not 100% sure what that date is, but they wanted to make sure that they could get JJ back in for the visit for the cookout week. And he actually took multiple visits to Georgia in this past week. He came to Georgia, went to leave to a couple other schools, and decided, you know what? I want to go to Georgia. I want to close this thing down. He called Trey Scott and let him know. And Trey Scott said, come on back for the cookout. Come enjoy it, meet some of these other commitments, get a chance to work with the staff as well, just because there was going to be some on-field work going on last week too. And so we got to work with coaches again. And so I just think the upside, like, you're going to hear the buzzwords, upside, development, project, ceiling, whatever words you hear about guys that haven't played a lot of football, but when you look at the tools that they have, they've got a chance to be really, really good. That's one of these guys that you're looking at here. And I think that Georgia has the luxury to do that because you look at the other two defensive line targets that Georgia is going to be recruiting the rest of this class, 5 stars Elijah Griffin and Justice Terry. You realize, all right, if you're going after these 2 5 stars, you've already got, a local, really talented blue chip guy in Christian Garrett in the class. You have Stephon Shivers, who is very much a, role piece in this class. You're not going to find 6'5", 350 very often. So when you can get that, you go and get that. I think that this is a piece where you say, all right, you've already got the core of your defensive line group kind of carved out with a little bit of work to do with Terry and Griffin. Who are the types of guys that you can add that would make sense? I think that someone who, and I'll say this too, you talk to his coaches, he's a guy that's wired like George. I mean, his coach had a great quote. He said, you've got, and I'm going to butcher it because I don't have it right in front of me, but this is a guy from California, from Europe. And Georgia's not for everybody, let alone a guy from California, let alone a guy from Europe, but it is for him, and it's definitely for him. And so I think the more that I talk to his coaches and the people that have worked with him since he was getting placed from Germany to California, that they realize Georgia's not an easy place to be. And a lot of guys like him would maybe veer away from Georgia because they realized the work or the challenge or whatever. But that when he got to Georgia for that camp in May, he immediately realized, wait a minute, this is the type of place that I want to be, because all that matters is people are going to play football and work, and that's all that they really care about. And so I think it's an intriguing one because, again, now he's Georgia's lowest rated commitment. That's not generally going to generate a lot of buzz, but I think that anytime Georgia elects to take someone that is Georgia's lowest rated commitment at a time like this, given the other pieces that they can add in the class, I think it's something that you should pay close attention to, because there's a reason why they decided to make this move when they did.
Kip, I thought Ben did a good job sort of outlining JJ's strengths and his potential, but what do you think of that addition? Like Ben said, it may not make a lot of waves, but it seems like that there's a pretty considerable upside with this commitment.
I mean, yeah, I think it speaks for itself when you got a guy that's played football for 2 years and also is set to, I think, really probably makes a big improvements this next year at Rancho Santa Margarita in California. I just think you look at that upside, you look at the fact that he's 17, won't turn 18 until I think late next year. So that gives you the high developmental upside, but also a guy that probably will be looking at, at the end of this high school football season going, the strides this guy made are incredible. He was a big impact player for his team. And so it won't seem like he's a raw prospect coming in, but you kind of peel it back a bit and look at Georgia's class and know that they have some guys that you could already plug into, specific roles. Stephon Shivers is going to be a guy that plays nose tackle. Christian Garrett's going to come in and be able to play, defensive tackle. And then you look at Elijah Griffin, Justice Terry as guys that Georgia is trending well for as elite talents that could play, multiple defensive line positions. And then you also think about the recent news that Georgia and every program are going to have more scholarships available to them next fall. This is a perfect example of loading up on the line of scrimmage and taking a guy that has that combination right now of talent, being 6'5", 285 pounds, with the work ethic that he has shown already. And then also just knowing that if this guy is willing to buy in to Trey Scott and Scott Sinclair and the strength and conditioning program and continue to develop, that he's a guy that, maybe year 2, year 3 is making a huge impact on an expanded Georgia roster.
Then let's flip over to the 2026 DBs that Georgia just added. One getting John Tavius Wyman from in-state and then flipping Dominic Kelly from USC. It seemed like for a while there, really in 2025 and 2026 classes, we had a lot of questions about DB and where Georgia was looking and what the thought process or strategy was. But, to me, it seems like that picture has become a whole lot clearer in these last few weeks.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any more concerns necessarily about how quickly Dante Williams and Travaris Robinson are getting acclimated to Georgia's coaching staff. I think the reason why we saw a little bit of a delay with them adding anybody at those positions is just because it's pretty obvious to me. It takes relationships, and people were familiar seeing T-Rob with an Alabama script A, and they were familiar seeing Dante Williams with the SC logo on. And it takes a little bit of time when you see that power G to say, all right, these are the guys that I've got that I'm associating with UGA. And I think once they were able to do some of their spring evals and really hone in on, all right, who do they want to bring in on official visits? That's when they really started to close in on the 2025 class. I don't think that they're done in the 2025 class at DB even this summer. Subscribe to Dogs 24/7. You'll read more about that over the next week and a half or so, I promise you. But beyond that, this 2026 class, I think, is really a sign of how ahead Dante Williams and Travaris Robinson have really started to get at DB, because, just a few weeks ago, I had somebody on Georgia staff reaching out to me and being like, Kirby Smart is no joke, because you're still trying to just live and survive in the 2025 class. And he is really harping on the fact, hey, at the University of Georgia, you got to start looking a year, 2 years down the line, start looking at 2026 recruiting. And clearly, the message did not come from Dante Williams, but clearly the message was received by Dante Williams, because for them to only have 3 commitments in the 2026 class, and 2 of them are guys that he was directly recruiting, he clearly took it to heart, and he found it to be important that he wanted to get ahead in the 2026 class. And so Jontavius Wyman is someone that Georgia offered in May, in-state guy that could play a bunch of different positions at DB, but really I see as a cover corner to start out. Electric personality, electric guy, really fits, I think, Georgia's identity at cornerback. And then Dominic Kelly, I think this right now, the way the offseason recruiting has gone, Georgia fans will gladly take any recruiting win that it looks like Kirby Smart pants Lincoln Riley a little bit. And I think that that's definitely what happened. I'll admit, I did not even realize that Dominic Kelly had been on campus this past weekend, to give you an idea of how Georgia was trying to sneakily work its way into this recruiting battle. Again, Dante Williams and Dominic Kelly have this relationship well before he ever gets to Georgia. Once he gets to Georgia, Georgia offers very quickly. Dominic Kelly had been looking around. I don't think that USC is totally blindsided by this decommitment on their end. I think maybe some of the bigger surprise comes in that Georgia had made such a serious push kind of late in this one. Now, these being 2026 recruitments, I think we all know they're going to continue to take visits. They're going to continue to get recruited by a lot of other places. By no means is this the last time that we're probably talking about Jontavius Wyman or Dominic Kelly from some kind of recruiting lens. But regardless of that, for Georgia to be, having the foundation that it has in the 2025 cycle, and to already have 2 guys locked into the 2026 class, I think is pretty impressive stuff from Georgia's new DB duo of coaches.
As Ben pointed out, Georgia has 3 commitments in the 2026 cycle right now, and 2 of them are DBs, which is definitely notable. And I want to make sure, too, Ben mentioned subscribing to Dogs 24/7. There is no better time than right now. We have a 60% off deal going on just in time for fall camp, which will start on Thursday. Come on board, join us over on the Junkyard, have a lot of fun with everybody over there. As Ben mentioned, Lincoln Riley, I saw that there was a long thread about the various back and forths between Kirby Smart and Lincoln Riley, whether it's in games or out on the recruiting trail. So that alone is worth it. But I encourage everyone to jump on board. 60% off, definitely something to get us ready and get us pumped up for fall camp starting later this week. We will take a quick break, come back, and jump into the fall camp breakouts draft, go through and pick which Bulldogs we think are going to make the most noise over the course of the next month. All right, fellas, it is officially draft season. We're going to go through and each pick 7 Bulldogs who we think are going to break out during fall camp. And just as a reminder, this was the setup we had back in the spring. Everybody will draft 1 running back, one wide receiver, one offensive lineman, one tight end, two from the front seven, which would be the defensive linemen and the linebackers, and one defensive back. So everybody will have 7 players. And deciding on the draft order, I was going back and forth between one, do we just reverse the order from back in the spring, or two, should we give some credit for how the spring draft went? And we wound up doing both, and that gives Kipp Adams the number 1 pick. Kipp had the 3rd pick back in the spring, put together an outstanding team. So he made it very easy to wind up reversing the order. So before we get into that first pick, Kipp, what's going through your head right now? What's sort of the mindset opening up this draft?
It's the position scarcity versus who do I think is overall going to have the most dominating camp, I guess, from the guys we're choosing from. So it's on one end, I want to try to predict what you guys are doing. On the other end, I just want to let it rip and pick overall my favorite breakout player in camp.
So we're reversing the order from back in the spring. Kipp will pick first. I will pick second. Ben will pick third. And then Ben will get the first pick in the second round as we go snake order. So hope everybody's ready. And I'll also ask the folks watching, you may have to bear with me some. I will be taking notes on who everybody has drafted, who's off the board for us, and try to keep track of all of these teams. So without further ado, Kipp Adams, you are on the board first. Who are you picking with the number 1 overall pick?
Well, like I said, I looked at the position breakdown and know that we have specific needs we have to fill. But in the end, I look at the options that we have, and there's just one guy that stands out that I think is going to, if not break out, just completely dominate over the next month and probably into week 1. And for me, it's Jalen Walker. I think that this guy is someone who, I've said this before, kind of reminds me of James Cook, in that the skill set is just tantalizing, and then I guess you get late in the season and you're like, why is this guy not on the field more? And I think that most Georgia beat writers were probably kind of saying that to each other, in the press box toward the end of the season last year with Jalen Walker, because it seemed like every time he's on the field, he was making plays on the ball, whether that's getting to the quarterback, just affecting the ball carrier. And I just think that now he knows, this is a huge season for him. He's got a chance to be a very high draft pick. If we're talking about guys that, after you get past the guys that have already been mentioned as first round potential picks, like, Carson Beck, Malachi Starks, Michael Williams, I honestly think Jalen Walker is that guy that the NFL scouts are just going to be, blown away by, if not already. They probably have him very high on the board. And I think even with this offensive line, it's not going to be ones-on-ones all the time. And in fall camp, I think Jalen Walker is going to be a menace. I think he's going to be a guy that, again, is going to be probably unblockable. And that's what the coaching staff, the other players, are going to be talking about this fall camp. We cannot block Jalen Walker. And so that's my first pick. I know that, again, it's a deeper position, but I think he's the best overall guy as far as this fall camp is concerned, and someone that I think Clemson will be spending probably the most amount of time trying to game plan against out of all the guys we're talking about in this draft.
It's hard to argue against that pick. I think we've been waiting for Jalen to be unleashed. Even going back to the SEC title game last year, I think he only played like 10 or 11 snaps and was just super effective. So I like that pick a lot. I will say I wasn't sure if Jalen Walker would be the first on the board, and I had my own board going into this, and I'm feeling really good because I'm going to get the top guy on my board. I'm getting KJ Bolden. It's going to be my pick. I always am. I pay attention to when Kirby Smart starts mentioning young guys. And a lot of the time, he's not going to hype up guys. He doesn't want to put too much pressure on a guy. And then he went to Dallas and SEC Media Days and is talking about how KJ Bolden's farther along at this point than Malachi Starks was in his freshman year. And And, again, continuing to hear things behind the scenes, continuing to just hear how seriously KJ Bolden has taken his preparation, I think that he's got a really good chance to put himself and assert himself for that starting role opposite of Malachi Starks. Now, I'm still sort of of the mindset that I think it's going to look a lot like it did for Malachi, where he may not be the starter to open the season. I see like Ja'Cory Thomas as a guy, an older guy who may get that role, but I think it's a matter of time before KJ breaks the starting lineup, and he's going to be my first pick. I think we're going to hear a lot about KJ Bolden over this next month. All right, Ben, I'm going to throw it to you. You have consecutive picks, but let's take them one at a time. Who is the first pick that you are going to make in this draft?
Well, I also am getting the number one player on my board, which I'm really excited about, which is for both scarcity purposes, but also I just don't think that we're talking about this guy enough and why Georgia brought him in. But I think Ben Urasek, the tight end out of Stanford, has the possibility to be one of the most important players on Georgia's offense this season. I think that everybody knows backfilling Brock Bowers is going to be a tall task. I think that there's a reason why Georgia went into the portal to find Ben Urasek. I think that they view him as an NFL type of guy, and I think that he has, first or second round potential type of, play depending on what kind of season he has at Georgia. And so I think on one hand, obviously there's not many tight ends, so I want to go get my guy. On the other hand, I think that this is somebody that the other piece of this too, we're talking about fall breakout stars. He hasn't been on campus really participating yet. And I think that because of that, there's going to be a lot of fall buzz once he gets in there. He's working with everybody and everyone realizes, oh, wait a minute, Todd Hartley knows what he's doing. There's a reason why he went into the portal to get Ben Urasek.
It's a good pick. I think he's someone that a lot of people are interested in, and just sort of seeing that dynamic of how he's going to fit in and what that's going to look like for the Georgia offense. I mean, I should have known that Ben's going to pick Ben. I mean,
yeah, well, that's the other piece that I didn't want to talk about. But yeah, I mean, obviously I was going to take Ben with my first pick if I had him available.
All right, we're moving on to the second round, and Ben, you're back up. Where are you going after picking Ben Urasek?
Well, you guys did take the two guys that I probably would have taken with this pick if either of them were there. So I'm going to take a guy that I think is going to have an impact on special teams. I think that he's going to have an impact in the passing game as well. I think that because, of events that you brought up at the beginning of the podcast, there's going to be wide receivers that are going to have to step into bigger roles. I really like Anthony Evans. I think that you're going to hear a lot of buzz about him because of plays that he makes as a returner. I think that there's a strong possibility that he ends up being one of the returners or, playing in multiple different return roles for Georgia. I also just think that there's going to be situations where Georgia is going to feel like it can put, Arian Smith on one side of the field, Anthony Evans on the other side of the field. In fact, I'd have to go back and watch to be certain, but I think in the SEC championship game when Carson Beck hits Arian Smith on the deep ball, Anthony Evans was on the field as well. And I think that as defensive staffs know their personnel really well and they realize, all right, you've got two, sub 10, 200 meter type of guys, both on the outside. That's going to be a really dangerous weapon for Georgia. And I think, when we talk about track type of speed that Georgia has at receiver, Anthony Evans to me is the most football player type of guy of that group. And so I think that he's someone that, is a good blend of track speed. He's got this sort of football ball skill type of mentality that you want as well. And I think that he's going to be a weapon for the offense this season.
It's kind of a weird situation where Anthony Evans is the last of those three receivers that signed in the 2023 class. But I think that's a great pick, Ben. I think that he's got a chance to really shine and at the very least be a really effective returner, because I think you can kind of lose sight of it because Georgia lost the game. But I mean, his punt return in the SEC title game kind of gave Georgia the life it needed. I really like that pick. I think Anthony Evans has a chance to really make some noise. All right. Ben went offense with both of his first two picks. I am going to go defense with both of my first two picks. And I'm going to get a guy that honestly I didn't think was still going to be here by the time I picked for the second time. I'm getting outside linebacker Damon Wilson. I think that Damon's got an opportunity to really break out. I've heard a lot of good things about him this offseason. I think he's a guy that we kind of lose sight of was a 5-star. It was a huge win when Georgia landed him over Ohio State when he was coming out of high school. I think he's ready to turn that corner. I think that we're all looking at outside linebacker and seeing that, if Georgia mixes things up, at least gets some other folks involved. I still think Chaz Chambliss is going to play a huge role, but we know Michael Williams is going to get some run there. I think Damon Wilson is going to have the kind of fall camp where Georgia's coaches and Chidera Uzo-Duribe, his position coach, just say, we have no choice. We have to get him on the field. I think he's looking really good. I think number 10 there is going to make some noise. Damon Wilson is my second pick and filling a big need on that front seven for me. Kipp, I'm throwing it to you with the last pick of the third round. What are you thinking and what you going to go with?
Well, I think if you're looking for breakout as in earning a starting job in week 1, if that's the criteria, then it's hard not to pick Roderick Robinson, just because as of now we think, Trevor Etienne might not be starting in that game. We're not really sure what his situation is going to be, and I doubt Kirby Smart's going to tell anyone until we see them take the field in Atlanta. So for me, I think Roderick Robinson has an opportunity right there in front of him to not just earn the starting role in week 1, but the whole offseason has been about the addition of Trevor Etienne and what it means for this offense. And so I think Roderick, going into, year 2 is really set up well to showcase what he brings to the table, what a year in Georgia's strength and conditioning program can do for him. And overall that, Georgia's running back room has kind of lacked that workhorse elite running back, for several years now. And I think he has an opportunity. He has a skill set to be a guy that you can count on for 20 carries if you need to. And, Lord knows that, Mike Bobo would love it to just have a running back that, let's say, frustratingly, he could give the ball to on first down and second down on more drives than fans would prefer him to. And so I think Roderick Robinson has a chance to maybe make his offensive coordinator look good and really showcase the ability to break tackles and get to the second level and really wear defenses down, especially in the second half. So I think with Georgia going on the road with big games, I think Kirby Smart's coaching staff would love to be able to trust Roderick's ability to lather him up and just give him double-digit carries early on to quiet the crowds. I think that's what they're going to prepare him for in fall camps. That's my first pick right there.
I like that pick a lot. I think that even when you factor Trevor Etienne in to the equation, that we're going to see a lot of Roderick Robinson. We still are waiting to see what exactly Branson Robinson can do. You got 3 freshman running backs. How much can you really rely on those guys? And then you factor in, like you mentioned, Kipp, Trevor Etienne may not play in that season opener against Clemson. A lot of pressure on Roderick Robinson, but I liked what I saw in the spring, and I think that bodes well for what he can do in fall camp and what he can do getting ready for the start of another season. All right, we're moving on now to the third round. Back to you, Kipp. Where are you going?
Yeah, I think right now I'm looking at that offensive line, and I'm thinking that's a long list of guys that we can pick from. Again, I'm thinking which one of these guys has a chance to make a move on the depth chart. And for me, I just think that this was something that I believe you were hoping for early in the spring. It didn't really catch on then, but maybe in fall camp, he's had the whole summer of working out. Maybe this is when Monroe Freeling makes a move for that right tackle position. And so again, Georgia at the very least, they want a third offensive tackle that they can trust for extended snaps, just like they do at guard. They want to be able on that third and fourth drive to, give their guys a breather. And I just think that Monroe Freeling is a guy that has the talent, the skill set to really stick and probably never look back. Once he gets that first start, he could be a multi-year starter for Georgia. So this fall camp is huge for him. And if he has a breakout fall camp, I mean, that's got to be huge news for Georgia this season. And that is not to take anything away from, guys who have been there longer, guys like Xavier Truss, who is getting a lot of preseason press clippings, a lot of love, from the media and is an NFL caliber player. But I think in the end, Monroe might be a guy that when the talent and the confidence match up with the technical skill set that he has, he's going to be too difficult for Stacey Searles to keep off the field. And I don't think he's going to want to keep him off the field. So I think this fall camp, you start hearing about how well Monroe Freeling is coming along in year 2.
Yeah, I like that pick quite a bit. I think about the fact that I wrote about Monroe on Tuesday and brought up the fact that, he could earn his way into a rotation. We know how much Georgia rotates in offensive linemen. I think he is capable of doing that and earning a role alongside of Xavier Truss. I still think Truss is going to be your starting right tackle, but I think we're going to see a lot of Monroe Freeling. I think he's got a chance to play a big role this fall. All right, it is my pick in the 3rd round, and I went defense with the first 2 picks and got to go offense. And following Kipp's lead with the running back, I'm going to go get Nate Frazier. I think that there's got to be at least one of these freshman running backs who rises to the challenge and winds up, getting significant snaps by the time the season gets underway. I don't love the fact that Nate wasn't around for spring ball, but if you look at a position where you can kind of handle coming in a little bit later, I think it's running back. He's just going to have to prove that he can hold up in pass pro. So I like a lot about Nate Frazier's game. I think he's a guy that has the speed to break away and make big plays, but is also physical enough that he can take those hits and keep piles moving. So going with Nate Frazier, I think that he's got a chance to really wow, hit the ground running at Georgia and make a positive impact early on.
I like that pick. I am going to go defense. I think that Raylan Wilson is arguably of the guys that on this list that are like breakout players that have a chance to be the All-American type of players. Like he's the one that I would probably, put my stamp on or stake my, if we're talking value bets or anything like that, like Raylan Wilson is probably in that group just because he's someone that I think is going to get a lot of run this year. He's someone that is as freakishly athletic as anybody in that room, which is saying a lot because they do have a lot of freaks in that room. But yeah, he is someone that I probably would have considered with my second pick of my first wraparound if I had been paying a little bit more attention. But I'm glad that I got him here with my 3rd round pick.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. I think that he's been a little bit overshadowed because C.J. Allen had to step up and play such a big role when Jamon got hurt last year. But I'm really high on Raylan Wilson going into his sophomore season. I think that bodes well for what he will be able to do and what he's capable of doing, especially with a year under his belt. And we know how much they ask of those inside linebackers. I think he is going to shine when it comes to fall camp. All right, Ben, moving on to the 4th round. You're up again. Where are you going?
I'm a little torn on what to do here, but I think I'm going to go defensive back.
Okay, I was going to buy you some time if you want to consider it. We can run through the positions everybody still needs.
Yeah, let's do that real quick.
So since Ben is up, he still needs a running back, an offensive lineman, another member of the front 7, and a defensive back. Kipp needs a wide receiver, a tight end, another member of the front 7, and a defensive back. And I need a wide receiver, an offensive lineman, a tight end, and another member of the front 7. So I'll throw it back to you, Ben. Where are you going?
I actually think that made me change the direction that I was going because it just gave me a moment of clarity. To Kipp's point around the offensive line, there are a lot of options there. Monroe is probably the one that's most likely to step into a starting role. I think it depends how we interpret fall breakouts and what it means to you. I think that to me, in some ways, it means, generating a lot of buzz or a lot of newfound buzz potentially. And I think of all the incoming freshmen that have come in, there's a lot of good options, but I think that Daniel Calhoun, based on I probably wasn't expecting to take Daniel Calhoun this early in the draft, but the more that I thought about it, I think that he's already been here now for the full spring. There were already amazing reports about him cutting weight in the spring and getting down to the playing weight that Georgia wants him to be playing at. I think that he is somebody that has a chance to crack the 2 deep because of his ability to play really all 5 offensive line spots probably. And so because of that, I just think that he's a name that's going to come up more and more. Now, there are going to be other names that might even get drafted by Jordan potentially that I think a lot of people are going to be paying attention to just because of, who they are, size, things like that. But I think that of the newcomers, Daniel Calhoun's the most likely to actually get some real run in year 1.
Yeah, I'll be honest, that was going to be my next pick. So I think that was a pretty good value there. And especially when you look at offensive linemen and understand that you only have so many options, it's a good pick. And I'll be interested just to see what we hear about him because, for him and some of those other guys that sort of showed up during the spring, a big piece of the puzzle, even coming back, when they got there in December or January, a lot of the focus is on cutting weight and getting in good shape. And, now that you've got several months under your belt, we'll be really interested just to see how he handles, how caught up to speed he is on everything, just how he fits in. Very good pick, Ben. I hate to admit that, but I think you got a good one there.
Thank you.
All right, so I am back up, and I'm trying to do the thing that I feel like Ben did a good job when we did the spring draft of kind of reading what everybody else needs and not getting not getting too caught up in the guy you like, but sort of seeing everybody else's cards and trying to figure out what is a need between somebody else. And I know that Kipp still needs a wide receiver, so I'm going to go get one. A guy much like Anthony Evans that I think can contribute both in special teams and also on offense. I'm going to go with Sakovi White. I think that he had a really good spring. He ended it on a high note with a touchdown that at the time was the go-ahead touchdown for his team. I've always been a fan of Sakovi, got a rep Cass High School. They used to be in the same region as my alma mater, so always going to be rooting on a guy that, I believe was the lowest rated signee that Georgia had in this class. A guy that's not the biggest guy, but I kind of think that only adds to his game and that he kind of plays with a chip on his shoulder. So I'm going with Sakovi White as my wide receiver. At the very least, I think he's going to get some run as a punt returner, maybe a kickoff returner, but I think he's got a chance to play enough and do enough in fall camp that people say, okay, we got to consider this freshman, see how we get him involved.
I love that pick. I think he's someone that's I think sometimes because he's the lowest rated guy, everyone thinks that means he's the least ready to play. And I think it's the opposite. I think that because of some of his height limitations, he was always going to be rated that way. But I think in terms of college readiness and the way that his body's built and how he understands the game, he's somebody that's going to be ready way earlier and way more than most freshmen are going to be.
All right, Kipp, let's finish off this 4th round. Where are you going with the first of back-to-back picks?
All right. Well, this one, I was just at the edge of my seat here because I've done this before where I pick a guy and I let one of my guys go way too long only to watch you guys just obliterate the position. And again, I know that I was just a spoiler alert, submitting my bold prediction for this upcoming fall camp. So you guys get the advance notice. My bold prediction is going to be my next pick, and that's Christian Miller. I'm not going to tell you what that prediction is, but he's my guy to break out because Georgia needs him to break out. I know that Nazir Stackhouse, again, getting him back was huge, and I think Warren Brinson, is a solid player as well. But what Christian Miller brings to the table is, I think, I'm not going to say he's going to hit the number because this isn't a season bowl prediction thing, but he's got double-digit tackles for loss potential. He's just got to stay healthy. And I think this offseason's been that first offseason where, again, he now has it all together. He has everything, at his fingertips for that light to come on. And if the switch is flipped, he's set up for a huge breakout season. So not just my fall camp breakout, he's my breakout player for this Georgia team. I just think that, again, he can give them that interior defensive lineman that wreaks havoc in the backfield. And I think it's been like a decade since Georgia's had a defensive tackle get double-digit tackles for loss. And he's that guy that can do it. And I think he's also going to get the snaps. It's not just playing defensive tackle. He can fill both spots. And he can play nose tackle as well, because you're not going to ask Nazir Stackhouse to play, if you're having him play 40, 50 snaps a game, then it's going to be really rough for Georgia's defense this year. So I just think Christian Miller is my guy to break out overall for this Georgia defense, possibly the team. And I just think that this fall camp is that first platform for him to showcase, okay, guys, this is it. Like, Georgia's defensive line hasn't really played at that level that got them back-to-back titles. I'm here to get them back to that level.
I like the Christian Miller pick quite a bit. I think for me, we know what Nazir Stackhouse is. I'm circling Christian Miller of like, this guy is going to determine just how good this Georgia defense is. I think they need another guy besides Nazir Stackhouse to rise to the occasion. And when you look at the group, I mean, I don't think there's a more obvious guy that fits that mold than Christian Miller. All right, Kipp, we're moving on to the 5th round. You got the first pick. Where are you going with it?
Yeah, this one's a little bit tougher. I think we're at the spot where there's probably 2 guys at multiple positions on the board, so I have to pick which one I'm going to not get the last pick on, so to say. So you know what? I will go with the slightly less deep position. I will go with tight end. I'll go with Lawson Lucky. Again, Benjamin Urasek has gotten all the press clippings this offseason as being the tight end addition that Georgia needs. And I know that, the freshman tight end will get a lot of eyes on him for the first time. So, people will be excited for those guys. And you know what? They have reason to be. But I think Lawson Lucky is still a guy that in the end is similar to Christian Miller, a guy that hasn't been able to showcase his skill set. We heard all types of buzz about him last spring, got banged up, set him back. And so I think he is that guy where kind of reminds everyone, like, guys, I'm still here and I'm an outstanding tight end. And I think that this is that fall camp, that opportunity for him to do that. And I think he just has the kind of the complete skill set where, you're wondering last year, like, who is able to stay in line to block for Georgia, who can kind of split the defense and give Carson Beck the intermediate target. I think Lawson Lucky kind of brings it all to the table in that aspect. So I think this fall camp, he kind of just reminds everyone there are a lot of flashier names in my position room. But I have the capability of not just, playing a big role, but becoming a dependable red zone weapon for Carson Beck. And I just think that's kind of where you look at last season, and Georgia kind of got bogged down when they got into that area of the field where the previous years it was always money. I just think that this fall camp, you start hearing about him catching 2 and 3 touchdown passes when Georgia's in the red zone drill.
Yeah, I think it's a great pick. I think I had a reaction. Don't think I had muted my mic because that was where I was going to go because I knew we were competing for tight end. But I think that people have kind of lost sight of, guys, Lawson Lucky might have been the most talked about Georgia player 2 springs ago. And we were all kind of sitting here like, is he about to jump Oscar Delp for sort of that second tight end spot behind Brock? And then Lawson gets hurt in fall camp, and it kind of seemed like, a bit of a lost season just because of injury. So I like that pick quite a bit. And yeah, Kip, I'm quite jealous that you got him there, but that's what happens with the draft. We make a board and we got to stick to it, no matter how bad it hurts us. All right, I'm going to go with another front seven member, and I'm going to go with a guy that I think has a chance to really, I don't know if come out of nowhere is exactly how I would describe it, but I think he's a guy that's overlooked on the front, and it's Jamal Jarrett. I think that he's got a guy Kip talked about needing to help Nazir Stackhouse, playing that nose tackle. I see Jamal Jarrett as that next guy up. I think that having a year under his belt at Georgia did him a lot of good. I think that there were some tough times early on while he was at Georgia. I think that he had to prove that he was up to the challenge and that he was a SEC caliber defensive lineman. And I think he's done that in the offseason this year. I think he's got a chance to make a lot of noise. And again, I don't know that he's going to be starting on this defensive line, but we know how much they rotate defensive linemen, and they need those big guys in the middle to make an impact and make a difference. Jamal Jarrett is my pick here, and I think he's got a chance to really make some noise.
Like that pick.
Yeah.
All right. I'm torn at this point because I know who I'm going to take at running back with my last pick. So now I've got to decide, who do I want to go with at DB, and who do I want to go with in the front seven? I've got two DBs I like. I've got two people in the front seven that I really like. I'm going to start with DB. I feel like this is a little bit of a shadier pick now that I take a look at it, just because I feel like in some ways he has already broken out. I feel like he had his breakout moment already, but I feel like for the sake of my draft, I got to go with Daniel Harris. I think that he's someone that I'll say the breakout move that he can make this year is breaking out from, where he's been to maybe emerging as the number one corner that Georgia's got. I think he's got a real chance to be that guy. I almost took him two picks ago, but in some ways I was just feeling like, I don't know, is he really a breakout guy? I don't know, but it doesn't matter. I'm taking him now. I feel good about the pick. And I think that he, of all the guys that I've drafted, has a chance to, again, him along with Raylan Wilson, maybe be the most effective guy on Georgia's roster this year, or at least of the guys that I drafted.
Before you get to your next pick, I'm just going to run through real quick with the positions that each of us still have to fill. So after Ben got Daniel Harris, he needs a running back and a member of the front seven. Kipp needs a wide receiver and a defensive back. And I need a tight end and an offensive lineman. So Ben, back to you.
Okay, so no matter who I take here on the front seven, neither of y'all are going to be able to take them. There's actually two guys that I really, really want. I'm going to take the older guy. I'm going to take Gabe Harris. I think that he got into the rotation a little bit more than you might have expected last year. I think that his versatility is going to get him more reps this season than some guys his age. I will admit it pains me for Nasir Johnson to go undrafted in this, because I do think when you talk about in past Georgia years, guys that come in and everybody says, holy moly, this guy is built differently than everybody else. We've seen it with Darnell Washington, Amarius Mims. You're still seeing that happen with Amarius Mims in Cincinnati now that he's gotten there. People having the realization like, oh my gosh, the way that this guy is built. That's going to happen with Nasir Johnson. People are going to get up close with him. He hasn't done a lot with Georgia because he just got here in the summer, but people are going to get around him and say, my goodness, this guy looks different than all of the other defensive linemen that Georgia's got here. So it does pain me for him to go undrafted in this, because I thought that I was going to end up taking him as my second front seven guy. But I think Gabe Harris has just been around so much longer that it's hard to think that he won't have a better fall than Nasir is going to have.
No, I think that I kind of found myself in the same spot between Jamal Jarrett and Nazir Johnson, and I just went with the older guy. I thought, maybe that will help him, and Nazir, I think, is going to make some noise, but there will be sort of a learning curve. But yeah, Gabe Harris, I think, has a legitimate shot at starting, or at least playing a lot of defensive end when Michael is standing up at outside linebacker. So like that pick quite a bit. I'm going to fill my need at tight end here. I'm going to go get Jaden Riddell. I still go back to during Orange Bowl prep when they put out that team picture and everyone had the exact same reaction of, oh my God, who is that guy? He looks like he's 7 foot tall and, not quite that big, but I think that you look at when Georgia has gotten these young tight ends, if they prove themselves, they get involved. And I know that this is a deep room, quite like it was 2 years ago. So, it may be hard for him to get a whole lot of playing time, but I like Jaden Riddell quite a bit. He was a highly rated tight end. We know that Todd Hartley recruits his position better than anyone else in the country. When in doubt, stick with Todd Hartley and bet on one of these young guys. All right, Kipp, going back to you to close out the 6th round. Where are you going?
Well, it's time for me to, I guess, complete my roster here. So I don't really have any risks or worries at this point. I kind of know where, what the last 2 positions I have to fill. So first off, I will go at wide receiver, and I will pick London Humphreys. I think right now you start to look at that Z receiver position. Obviously, Dylan Bell, if we're talking about the season, we know that he is set up for a huge breakout season. And I think he's going to be a guy that, again, we're talking about on all conference lists, maybe, maybe even more. And he's got a chance to really boost his NFL stock this year. But we also know that Georgia rotates their receivers a lot. And right now, when you start to look at, after him on the depth chart there's a guy that, we've been waiting for. And every time he's on the field, you know that he's probably getting the ball, but then you don't see him for 3 or 4 games, and that's Arian Smith. That skill set is the aspect of Georgia's offense that can open everything up, right? And from everything we've heard, they are pushing him as hard as they can to be that guy, that dependable option this year. And because he's one of the fastest players in the country, and obviously they want to harness that speed. But again, if it doesn't all come together, they just grabbed a very similar skill set this offseason in London Humphreys. That's why they went to the portal to get him from Vanderbilt, because they saw firsthand, when he scored the touchdown on them in Nashville, that this guy is a burner. And so he can help at this position. He can help, on the outside. He can help across the middle. He brings a lot to the table. So while they're pushing Arian Smith, I think they want to know for sure, what is the floor at this position, at the Z wide receiver position? And, I think that's where London Humphreys comes in this fall camp. And he has a chance to really showcase that speed, but also he's had more time to pick up Georgia's offense. And so I think fall camp, you didn't hear as much maybe about him as you thought you would during the spring. But now, again, he's had more time to get more comfortable, to get that chemistry going with the quarterbacks. And I think fall camp's where you start hearing more about him being a real issue for Georgia's cornerbacks.
I think that's a good point. And I think, that the Georgia staff, once that play happened against Vanderbilt, when he scored like a 49-yard touchdown, that they were like, let's go get that guy. Remember that name. And it wound up working out well for Georgia, landing London Humphreys. All right, we're entering the 7th and final round. I'm going to go through the positions everybody still needs to fill. Kipp needs a defensive back. I need an offensive lineman, and Ben needs a running back. So, Kipp, we're going back to you. Which defensive back are you taking?
I'm taking Ellis Robinson. I mean, come on, guys. My bold prediction this spring was that there would be not 1, but 2 cornerback position battles. And you know what? We can debate whether that happened in the spring, but no one is locked in Dalen Everett and Julian Humphrey as Georgia's starting cornerbacks for Atlanta. And so I think right now, Ellis Robinson comes into fall camp ready to kind of showcase his physical talent. And we know he's confident. I don't think he's worried about the fact that he's the true freshman. I don't at all. I think he walked into that position room thinking, I'm the most talented player in this position room. But he also has the work ethic to back it up. I think you start looking at what Julian Humphrey brings to the field as far as his top end speed, his explosiveness. And then you look at Daniel Harris. I mean, the size speed combo is rare, but Ellis Robinson has both of that. He has both of their skill sets in one package, and I think that right there gives him a chance to really soak up as much as he can from his coaching staff. And every single snap, I think he's going to get better and better every single practice. And then towards the end of fall camp, I think that coaching staff is going to have a very, very difficult position as far a decision to make as far as who their starting cornerbacks are going to be. And I don't know, they might not be able to really make that decision until they take the field against Clemson, just because I think Ellis Robinson is that good.
When Ellis's name was brought up to Malachi during SEC media days, he was just like, dude, he's so long. He was like, I cannot believe, like, when he first saw him, how big he was. Ben, before I take my pick, are you as surprised as I am that Ellis Robinson made it to the 7th round?
Well, I didn't know what to do with my pick. I mean, I wanted Ellis. I always thought Ellis was going to be on my team, and then Daniel Harris is sitting there when I'm picking 5 and 6, and I'm like, am I not going to take the guy that just dominated the bowl game? Like, what do I do here? So Kipp, I think got some draft. The way the draft played out was fortunate for Kipp there.
All right. Now, you mentioned this earlier when we were talking offensive line. I've got to get an offensive lineman. Who do you think I'm getting with this pick?
I'll be honest with you. I really don't know. I mean, I think I would go with 2 guys for 2 completely different reasons.
I'll go ahead and tell you who I'm picking, but just from the way you reacted earlier, I thought you were on to me. But I'm getting Marcus Harrison.
Oh, interesting.
He's a guy that's coming in late. He's a guy we don't know a ton about, but he's humongous. Ben, is he 6'9"? Is that right?
Probably 6. I think 6'8.5". I think is where he measured in when he was on his visit last summer. So who knows now? He might be 6'10" now.
So I'm going Marcus Harrison again. He's a guy that is not going to necessarily get in the mix right away because he's got a lot to learn. But I think he's the kind of guy that we're going to be hearing stories of, like, you guys will not believe what Marcus Harrison did on the practice field on Tuesday, or listening to some of the older defensive linemen and them just saying, yeah, I mean, Marcus Harrison, man, he's a freak. So I'm going with him, understanding that, he's got a long way to go. But I think the fact we don't know that much about him, I just feel like there's a lot of potential there that we might get some stories out of this that sound like, a Yeti or like the Loch Ness Monster. Like, you guys just cannot believe this Marcus Harrison kid.
No, I agree with you. I think he's the Paul Bunyan of Athens. I think that nobody knows anything about him, and then we're going to be hearing legends of things that he's done for years and years to come. I think that's a really good pick. I'll be honest. I thought Jamal Merriweather was a pick that could end up on somebody's team because I think he's going to crack the 2 deep and play a role in some capacity this year. I think he was on a fall breakout team or spring breakout team potentially. So I thought that he might. And then I just thought because Jaw Jackson, he's not going to play this year. I don't think anybody's expecting him to play this year. But anytime there's a 6'10", 340-pound guy on a roster, I was talking to a coach of JJ that committed yesterday, and they had been down at practice or workouts and things like that. And he said the thing that blows his mind about Georgia is that he got there, and the first thing that he wanted to see was Jaw Jackson. So he's looking around for this 6'10", 340-pound guy, and he's like, "Oh, that must be him." And it's like, "Oh, nope, that's Michael Uni." It's like, "Oh, that must be him." Nope, that's Nair Daniels. Like, that must be him. It's like, nope. And it's like, you can go down the list and you think that it's going to be obvious seeing this 6'10", 340-pound guy. And then all of a sudden there's 6 or 7 guys that you look at and you're like, that could maybe be him if I'm looking at him from a distance. And so I thought Jaw Jackson was a possible pick for you just because I'm sure he's going to do something crazy this fall that everybody's going to be talking about just because he's so new to it. And there's only one guy like him in the entire building.
All right, Ben, the Mr. Irrelevant pick is up. You need a running back. Who are you going with?
Yeah, I was hoping that it would play out this way. This is maybe a pick from the heart, but when I realized that I was going to have the very last pick, I thought that you all would probably take running back by this, would have already taken running back by this point. I want Branson Robinson. I think every single person that, has known what he's gone through, wants to see him be successful. I think that what does breakout mean for him? Like that might vary. And I'm not necessarily expecting Branson by taking him here. I am not predicting that he's going to be full go ready week 1, but I think that he is a name that you're going to start hearing like, oh, he's doing some more this day. He's doing some more this week. He's involved here and there. And what that means in terms of what his role is actually going to be this fall is going to be 100% health dependent. Doctor's choice, Branson's choice. I'm sure all of the, typical coach cliche things that Kirby Smart's going to say around that leading up to the season. That said, I think that when he gets back onto the field and starts doing more and more, assuming that he is able to do more and more as it feels like he might be able to, the closer that we get to things, I think you're just going to hear a lot of Branson Robinson buzz because he's someone that everyone's going to be rooting for. And he's someone that I think that once he's healthy, he has the ability to crack a rotation that, there's not a ton of depth there right now, at least in terms of typical Georgia running back rooms that we've talked about in the past. So a little bit of a leap of faith from a health standpoint with my last pick, but I definitely wanted him on my team.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. And to your point, there's opportunity in this running back room. So if he's healthy and ready to go, that bodes well for him. And Kirby talked about him at media days and was like, he looked good. We still have to see once we get into camp what he's able to do. But yeah, I think a lot of people are rooting for that pick to pan out because we've seen the potential. It's just all going to come down to how healthy he is.
Yeah, that was a little bit of pandering too. I felt like I might catch a couple of stray votes from people being like, yeah, I want Branson to be good this year.
A vote against Ben's team is a vote against the return of Branson Robinson. Can you believe? I cannot believe the pandering going on this podcast.
That's exactly right.
All right, we're going to roll through these teams real quick just to catch everybody up. And I'm going to go through them position-wise. This is not the order they were drafted. Kipp, he got running back Roderick Robinson, wide receiver Julian Humphreys, wide receiver London Humphreys, I should say. Offensive lineman Monroe Freeling, tight end Lawson Lucky, front 7 defender Jalen Walker, front 7 defender Christian Miller, and defensive back Ellis Robinson.
Stout team. That's a stout team, Kipp.
It's a good one. I got running back Nate Frazier, wide receiver Jacoby White, offensive lineman Marcus Harrison, tight end Jaden Riddell, front 7 defender Damon Wilson, front 7 defender Jamal Jarrett, and defensive back KJ Bolden. Ben got running back Branson Robinson, wide receiver Anthony Evans, offensive lineman Daniel Calhoun, tight end Ben Urasek, front 7 defender Raylan Wilson, front 7 defender Gabe Harris, defensive back Daniel Harris. Now let's go through these real quick, and I'm going to start with you, Kipp. Just how do you feel about how your team came together? Any parting thoughts on how this draft played out?
I don't know if my team's the flashiest, but I feel a lot better about how this fall camp draft went than the last one. I didn't have like that moment where I'm just like, I let him go. Like you guys didn't attack me in the positional selections as much. So like you guys said, I got some draft luck this time. So it kind of raised my floor a little bit and allowed me to not make too many bad decisions. I think if my guys break out, then it'll probably be the best for Georgia because these are guys that Georgia needs to play pivotal roles this year. And that's kind of what I kind of gravitated towards. Like I wanted the clock is ticking, but also, these guys are talented enough for if the light comes on, Georgia's able to kind of get back to where they were during their championship run. So overall, feel pretty good about it. I think, it's probably the strongest of these drafts I've had. So I really, really feel bad comparing it to the previous, attempts at this. And I just, thank you guys for giving me the, the confidence boost.
Yeah, it's a stout team, no doubt. Looking at mine, I really like the defense. Damon Wilson, Jamal Jarrett, KJ Bolden. I went a little younger on the whole than I would have liked. Having freshmen KJ Bolden, Jaden Riddell, Marcus Harrison, Jacoby White, Nate Frazier. probably would have wanted a few more experienced guys, but I feel so good about my defense and the chance for those guys to make a big impact and to generate a lot of buzz that I feel pretty good about how this is going to play out. Ben, what do you think about how your draft wound up playing out?
Yeah, I mean, I feel good about it. I never seem to shake out as great in the voting as I expect to, but I wanted Ben Urasek on my team. I think that not to tip my breakout article tomorrow, but I think you'll probably hear me write a little bit about Ben Urasek in that. So I feel good about that pick. There were just a couple of times I had some coin flip options that I didn't know which direction to go, and I'm not sure how it'll play out. But I feel good about my draft.
Yeah, make sure and keep an eye out both over on the Junkyard and also on Twitter. We will have a poll for everyone to vote, and we'll see how that plays out. And then we'll revisit this draft once fall camp is over as we're getting ready for the season opener. Ben and I think Kipp both had teased a little bit the bold prediction story that we're going to have come out on Wednesday. Keep an eye out. Each of us are going to have a bold prediction on what's going to happen in fall camp. I had posted last week on the board asking for folks' bold prediction. I pulled just a few of them, especially tried to stay away from any that I thought might come up when we write it. But Kibo120383, his bold prediction was that Ellis Robinson wins the starting cornerback spot. He and Kipp were on the same wavelength there. TG33, I think maybe I'd read this and decided I was going to use it for my draft strategy. Jamal Jarrett makes some noise and challenges for a starting role up front. Dog Blog says Jaden Rashada wins QB2. Sorry to Macho. I hope he wasn't listening. That was going to be not good news for him. And Cotton Dog says Gabe Harris and Samuel Mpemba are going to make noise. Sam Mpemba was somebody I considered in this draft. I think he'll have a chance to turn the corner as he gets ready for his sophomore season. All right, want to make sure and tell everybody again to go subscribe to Dogs 24/7. We got a 60% off deal. We're going to have a ton of content leading up to fall camp on Thursday, and then we're going to blow it out on Thursday with all kinds of content from the first day of fall camp. Be sure to go to Dogs 24/7 on YouTube, especially on Thursday. We will have a lot of videos from Kirby Smart and the players. Not sure we're going to be able to watch practice, and I highly doubt we're going to video. But if we do, there will be video over there. And also keep an eye out on TikTok. We will have video the next few days, both from this podcast and some stand-up stuff, getting ready for fall camp. And I'd tell everybody who is listening live to stay tuned to the Paul Feinbaum show at 5:30 Eastern on Tuesday. I'm going to be popping on there, talking a little Georgia Bulldogs. So that'll be super fun to catch up and talk a little with Paul. So we'll wrap it up right there for Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk. I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.